Chicon and Wilkerson Law Firm. Today we have another great topic for you. We're going to be discussing what some of the most expensive mistakes that we see folks make in divorce. Okay. And so a quick roadmap. We're going to talk a little bit. Pretty much, we're going to just kind of go through the list, and they are going to be in no particular order of the general mistakes that we see folks make, whether they are pro se, whether they have counsel, to really drive up the cost of divorce. Okay. And this could really apply to really probably all domestic relations cases, child custody cases, legitimation cases. Of course, the more fighting that is involved, the more litigation that's involved, the more complex the issues, the more it stands to reason, the more expensive the cost of litigating and representation can become. So why don't we just go ahead and dive right in, and we'll talk a little bit about how one bad decision or a number of bad decisions can really drive up the cost of litigation and the cost of your divorce. And so we'll talk specifically about divorce, but just keep in mind that this can apply to really any kind of domestic relations case. Okay, so most people think that divorce is expensive because of the attorneys, and that just rarely is the case. Though attorneys do bill at different billable hours if they're a billable hour law firm. So some attorneys might bill at 150 per hour. Some may be an associate, some might be partners, and so they could bill from 150 up to $1,000 per hour. Just really depends on, and I shouldn't say up to $1,000 per hour because some attorneys bill well over $1,000 per hour, right? I don't know what Johnny Cochran was making, but so some attorneys, again, it depends on the area of law that they practice in as well, and then whether or not their law firm actually has billable hours. Some attorneys will do flat fees. Some work on contingency fees, like a lot of your PI attorneys who might get what's called a contingency fee or a percentage of what the outcome might be. That does not happen in a family law case. Okay, that is unethical. So if you're calling and asking if your family law attorney can work on your case, and there be a contingency fee based on whatever the share is of the equitable estate. That is not that is unethical here in the state of Georgia. Okay, so family law attorneys cannot do that. Divorce attorneys cannot do that. So do not ask. Okay, so let's talk a little bit. We're talking divorce cases, and I do want to talk a little bit about again why sometimes the mistakes that we see of why the cost of divorce can be driven through the roof. All right, and so what we'll cover is some of the most expensive divorce mistakes that we have seen, how to avoid these mistakes, and how to protect your money, your children, as well as your future. Okay, so let's go with number one. And this is a big one, especially it's a curious one because sometimes we will have folks who will give us a call, do a consultation. They're already pretty aware and cognizant that they need to probably go forward with some form of representation. They know that they have a complex case involving children. They know that it's high stakes. Sometimes the other side will even already their spouse will have beat them to the punch. They'll already have hired an attorney. They already have a war chest. That attorney is clearly on the offensive. They are marching, and we'll get a call, and sometimes they'll say, "Well, I'll see how things play out," and then we'll get a second call from those same folks, and they will say, "Hey, yeah, I just had I had a hearing yesterday. It was my final, and I got reamed. What can I do about that?" Well, at this juncture, there's not much we can do about it for you. Okay, there might be something that can be done, but most of the time there is very little that we can do to help after the final has already been entered. Okay, so it's important to know that waiting too long, even to even get legal advice, can really hurt your interest. Okay, especially, let me just be clear, you have a complex case. If children are involved, if there are major assets involved, if retirement is involved, the house, the equity in the home is involved, if there are investment properties involved, you need an attorney. Okay, that is the best advice I can give you. Now, which attorney you decide to go with, that is up to you, but you do the cost benefit analysis, and then you of course make the final decision about, who you elect to go with. But understand that these are high asset proceedings, and some of the times, and high conflict proceedings. And unless you are as knowledgeable as, if there's counsel on the other side, unless you have a law degree, it's ill-advised to move forward without representation. It's ill-advised. Okay. And so, I know that there are a lot of DIYers out there, who work on their cars themselves, work on their house themselves. This is just not one of those things that I would do myself. Okay. If I have a heart condition, it's not something I'm going to self diagnose. It's not something that I'm going to try to address myself. There are certainly things that I can do. However, I am going to probably seek the advice of a medical professional, right? Or you can seek the advice of a spiritual advisor if you elect to go in a different route, right? Because you may not be with us very long, if you choose to, do the ill-advised thing, right? And so sometimes in these situations, the number one thing that we see is folks either A, wait way too long to get counsel involved, or they just don't seek any kind of counsel whatsoever, right? Even advice, okay? And so some attorneys, you can do your consultation, and some will be very transparent. We're very transparent with folk. If we can help you, we'll say, hey, yeah, we can help you out. Like, yeah, that sounds like something that we can assist you with. And if we can't, then we'll say, hey, I don't think that that's something that we can help you with, okay? But just understand, generally, the advice that we give to folks who have high asset cases, high conflict cases, cases involving children, cases involving property, or, again, if it's going to be a marital estate that needs to be divided, we are going to tell you that you need counsel. Okay. And for my cheapskate friends out there, the couple of thousands or even $10,000 that you might save not going with counsel, I cannot tell you the hundreds of thousands of dollars I've seen people lose out on the back end because they did it themselves and they fumbled the ball. Okay. And after you fumble the ball, there's only one person to blame. That's going to be the man in the mirror, right? You saved a few thousand, you lost out on a couple hundred thousand. I've seen people lose out on almost $1 million, right? Simply because they elected to do it themselves and they did it very badly. All right. So, another thing that we see is folks will take advice from friends and family. Okay. Every case is different. You might be standing in front of a different judge. You may have a different set of facts. You just don't know, the different law might apply to your case. You may have one party might have more assets to divide. There might have been infidelity in one case and no infidelity in your case. Cases are different, right? Facts applied to the law give different outcomes, all right? And so you have to be very careful and very wary of folk that are giving you legal advice. And then sometimes, and many times, I'll say, the advice is not sound advice, okay? It is advice, and if they get it wrong, all they can tell you is, "Oh, I'm sorry," okay? And so it is your case. It is up to you to do the homework. It is up to you to do the research. Do not be lazy, especially with all the tools at your fingertips. You can go to AI. You can ask AI questions about, hey, should I get legal advice or should I move forward with an attorney in a case like mine? I'm not saying to do that. All right. This is when I should lead with, this video is for educational purposes only. Watching this video does not establish an attorney client relationship. And so, of course, take everything I say with a grain of salt, but it's what I would do. Okay. I would say, hey, I would do the research, I would do the legwork, And then, of course, I would get on the horn, maybe talk to a few attorneys, find out whether or not it's something that I need counsel for. If it is, I would see how expedient it is that I retain counsel. If you have been served, understand, my friend, that you are already on the clock. Okay. You have to get a response in. All right. And so some folks have been served. And like I was saying, we'll ask, how long ago were you served? Oh, I was served about 28 days ago. Okay. So yeah, you're up against the wire. This is the 11th hour for you. You should probably think about hiring an attorney. And it's not that some of them don't have the resources to hire an attorney, they just don't want to. Okay. And I understand that, right? But just understand that if you do not, just because you stick your, like a stork, you stick your head in the sand, doesn't mean the problem goes away. Okay. And so it just might mean that you're going to deal with a bigger issue on the back end. So bear that in mind. Waiting too long, advice from friends and family, listening to social media, or another big one is trusting your spouse's attorney. Okay, so your spouse has an attorney; they're talking to you like, "Yeah, just go ahead and sign that paperwork. It's no big deal. We're being transparent with you, and I don't really have a dog in the fight. Just go ahead and sign right there on the dotted line." Doing those types of things, that type of activity and conduct is going to probably get you in trouble. Okay, you need your own attorney. Okay, to give you counsel, right? That is your spouse's attorney. Whatever obligations, whatever duties and responsibilities they have are to your spouse. They have none to you, all right? So you are not their client. Your spouse is their client. So bad idea to take advice from your spouse's attorney if that's what you're doing. All right. So sometimes by the time we come into a case, if we come in very late, assets are already gone or given away, evidence is already missing because one spouse was just more legally savvy than the other. They, were on it. They got documents they needed, they moved things around, moved assets around because you were slow. You were dragging your feet, right? And so they played offense. You decided to play defense, and you're behind the eight ball now, all right? Or there might be some mistakes that have been made. And so we'll get calls occasionally. Hey, I've already done this, this, and this, and this. So I only need you guys to really do that. And I'll say, you've done what? Like you've given your house away? Like you've already divided the assets? Like we were supposed to engage in some horse trading with the others. There's nothing to trade now, right? All right. So sometimes people think that they are saving themselves money or saving themselves heartache, and they are just creating bigger problems for themselves in the divorce. So the point is, the sooner you bring an attorney on, the better, and the more options you usually have. Okay, so you always want to keep your options open. So super important to have an attorney, very early on if you can do it, or if you have the resources. Okay, so mistake number two in the divorce that we see is moving out of the house super early, right? So some people would do this kind of at the outset. As soon as the first sign of trouble, folks will hit the door, kind of leave the house. One of the parties will leave the house and leave the house to the other spouse. And so they may leave during an argument and never think about the consequences. And of course, the house will possibly be divided. At least the equity in the house might be divided later on. However, if you leave, for example, you leave the house and you leave with your minor children, with your spouse, that can create temporary custody issues a little bit later for you. It can create some parenting time disputes for you, as well as even possession of the home. And there's some financial complications that might come in the wake of your absence as well. Okay. And so, very important to have counsel, very important to seek advice on this. And again, each case is different, right? Some spouses just can't stand one another. They are at each other's throats. The police are being called out to the marital residence. And so it's probably a good idea that they part ways. However, again, it's a conversation that need to be had with your counsel so that your rights are protected, not just your parenting rights if you have children, but as well as the equitable division of the marital estate. Okay. So before moving out, you want to understand how it absolutely impacts your case. All right. Mistake number three is a big one, and it's going to involve hiding assets. We have another video here on our channel that talks about specifically about hidden assets, and it's something that is pretty prevalent when it comes to divorce, especially if one spouse has a business. We are always trying to track down the assets that have been moved around, right? And they're doing it for obvious reasons. They don't want it to be subject to equitable division. But if you, the longer you wait, the easier it is kind of for that partner to put those assets in the wind, and it's harder for us to track them down. Usually, we would have to bring in a forensic accountant to assist us in bringing back, clawing back those assets, right? So, usually what we see is you'll see these hidden bank accounts, you'll see the transference of money to family members, friends, loans. They'll move funds into secret accounts. They'll move it into crypto, which is hard to track down. And so, usually, if we can get into the case early enough, and we can go ahead and get the discovery process moving, there's things that we can subpoena, we can uncover some of those assets, and then we can also take shots at the credibility of your spouse, okay, which is going to hurt them in either a bench trial or a jury trial if it becomes obvious that they have been moving assets around. And so that's going to help you hurt them. However, to prove that, it requires us being in the case and actually engaging in the discovery process and being able to try to track those things early on as opposed to later. And that gets back to what I talked about in mistake number one, coming into a case just too late. All right. And so the court sometimes can even punish a dishonest spouse, but again, it really depends. All right. So honesty is usually cheaper than getting caught, but it doesn't stop spouses from trying to hide assets from another spouse. All right, mistake number four is a big one, especially in this day and age. And it's going to just be posting on social media, right? It's an easy fix. However, sometimes people get so emotional, they just can't help themselves, or they're just really clumsy when it comes to protecting their private lives. And so, just understand that nothing usually good comes of posting stuff on social media when you are going through a divorce. And some examples that we see on there that are going to absolutely be used as exhibits in court are folks posting new relationships. They want to get under the skin of their spouse. And so they are posting pictures of their new relationship with their new boo, with their new paramour. And it's going to be problematic, right? They're posting vacation photos. They're telling the judge that they don't have any money, but guess what? You're posting a vacation photo in Bora Bora, or you're sitting there, in Japan. You're in Hong Kong. You're just kind of hanging out. You're gallivanting all over the world. And so one of the questions the judge might have for you is, well, where is this money coming from? Okay. Or you're posting party pictures or angry posts. And there are things that might harm your interest when it comes to custody. Okay. So if you are posting pictures of doing illicit drugs, or if you're posting pictures with your children, and your children are disheveled, or they are unsupervised, that stuff might come back to haunt you. So you don't want to post things that are going to be used potentially as exhibits in court against you. You don't want to make your spouse's case for them. Okay. So social media is another big no-no. Something that we see that can drive up the cost of divorce, again, because your counsel has to do everything in their power to protect your reputation and your credibility. Okay. Number five is going to be using children as messengers. That all it does is really create more infighting. And the more fighting that happens, the more litigation usually that follows. And then it involves a lot of consultations with your counsel. All of that stuff is driving the cost of representation through the roof. Okay, so using children as messengers, talking badly about the other parent, asking kids to choose sides, sharing information, it often backfires. Judges want to see the parents putting children first, and usually what ends up happening is you're going to get hauled into court on various motions, or things like, hey, this party is in contempt. They are engaging in parental alienation. They're violating the temporary protective order. And so, where the parties are not in agreement on things or they're fighting, just understand you're driving up the cost of litigation, all right, and representation. Number six is going to be just fighting over everything. And sometimes we have clients and their opposing parties. They would like to use counsel as both a sword and a shield. Okay, and in that sense, you'll end up filing motions. We don't engage in frivolous litigation. However, they'll they're on the phone going back and forth. Their counsel is doing the same. Okay, letters are being exchanged between the attorneys. Phone calls are being exchanged through the attorneys are trying to essentially mediate between the parties, and it just drives up, unnecessarily drives up the expense of representation. Okay, so some cases become more expensive just when neither side is willing to compromise. Okay, you go through a something like a mediation. You can sit in mediation for 8 hours. You don't reach an agreement. That of course drives up the cost of representation. Your counsel is sending out offers. The offers are being rejected. You know those types of things. There's motions being filed. There's discovery requests being made. One party is not complying with the discovery. You're going back to court on motions to compel the other party to provide the discovery, just driving up costs. Okay, and so this is one of the things that you want to avoid, fighting over everything, because it's going to cost you thousands of dollars in attorney's fees. Okay, and then months or even years in court. And much of this is just emotional energy. Okay, and it's being directed through your counsel at the other party. Okay, so you got to ask yourself if the fight is worth the cost. All right, mistake number seven is overlooking retirement accounts. That is a big one. So many people focus on the house, on the car, even on some of the bank accounts and the debt, but forget about the 401ks, the pensions, the retirement, the stock options, the IRAs, that type of stuff. And so that kind of that money, those resources can be used to offset the cost of your divorce. Especially if it's something that you can get access to at the conclusion of the divorce. So it's important that that stuff be addressed, during the proceedings, to hopefully mitigate the cost of going forward and having good representation. Mistake number eight is just failing to identify hidden assets. Again, that's going to be good in mitigating the cost of the divorce. But if you fail to do that, you're not catching those business expenses, those business income, cash, cash businesses, cryptocurrency investment accounts, deferred compensation that can be used to again offset the cost of the divorce. It can come back and bite you, and of course, it's not mitigating what the expense of moving forward with representation, what it might look like. Again, if you could defray those costs somehow, with again having access to some of those hidden assets. Number nine is just going to be letting your emotions essentially take control and control all of your decision making, drive your decision making. Divorce is already emotional. Okay. Your counsel should be an impartial third party, and they should be giving you advice and counsel to try to assist you through this very, very difficult time in your life. But sometimes, because people are emotional, they will make emotional decisions. For example, and it can override logic. All right, so There might be a good settlement on the table. If you are just refusing to settle or to compromise in any way possible, filing unnecessary motions or asking unnecessary motions be filed, or you're just pursuing a pathway to revenge, you want a pound of flesh. It's just a very expensive undertaking. We as counsel, it's not something that we engage in. We will try to let our clients know and to manage our clients and let them know, hey, listen, this sounds like an emotional decision. It that is not going to move the needle in your case. We certainly understand your position, but our goal is not to frivolously throw our clients money and flush it down the toilet. We want to make certain that we are going to be doing the best thing for you in the long run, because we are thinking of our client 2 years, 3 years down the road. When you have moved on, we want to make sure that you are still in good position. So we try to advise our clients on what appears to be an emotional decision and what seems to be kind of devoid of logic. Of course, it's easier said than done when you are not the party going through the divorce, right? But we certainly understand that we try to communicate that with our client. Okay. So mistake number 10 is going to just be filing pro se when there's major assets or your children are at stake and your access to your children. And so this is something that we counsel our clients on as well. If you have a complex divorce, there are assets on the line, your access to your children, custody rights. If it's going to be a zero sum game, one parent wants primary custodianship, the other is the same. You need an attorney. Okay. You don't, there is no other advice I can give outside of you should be attorney shopping. Okay. Because anything else is going to just, in my opinion, is not going to put you in position to prevail. Okay, you are sitting at a craps table in Las Vegas, hoping to land on black. All right, and the reality is you might prevail, but my I try to stack the deck. All right, as best that I can, and I think that any parent, any mother, any father, any guardian should do the same. You're going to stack the deck by going with a legal expert that is local, that understands the local rules, understands the judge, how that judge likes to rule, understands the facts in your case, how to apply to the law, and essentially advocating for you on your behalf to essentially see if you can get your rights exercised and honored by the court, right? And so that's what you want. And so the best thing to do in that situation is to bring on counsel that is going to be best suited to do that. Okay. So minor children, retirement accounts, marital residence, a business, or even significant debt, you want counsel, you want an attorney, all right, to help you out. All right. So the other thing I will say is the last thing is not thinking about life after divorce is one that can be a very, very costly mistake that we see sometimes our clients make. So housing, retirement, taxes, child related expenses, insurance, those are all things that you should be thinking about. It might not necessarily drive up the cost of divorce, but that cost of living can be something that you want to think about, because the divorce is probably going to set you back a little bit, right? Simply because of how things might be divided regarding the marital estate. One party might take an oath of poverty. You might lose access to the home. You may lose half of your retirement. One party, the non custodial parent, may be paying out child support to the custodial parent. So all of that, you need to think about that life after the divorce. Again, we already discussed defraying the cost of the divorce and trying to mitigate any kind of financial impact that you might have suffered as a result of the divorce. And so you're going to do that by, thinking post divorce, and as well as thinking in real time what's going on during divorce. And so that is the best thing that you can do is, again, having counsel that is going to be able to kind of help you navigate those waters. Okay. All right. Well, that is all that I have. Again, thank you for joining us. These are some of the things that we like you to think about that might drive up the cost of your divorce, or ways that you can mitigate the cost of divorce post divorce. If we can help you out, 478-845-1213 or 404-999-9529. My name is Genghis Khan, myself and attorney Wilkerson. We are a boutique law firm. We handle divorce, child custody, as well as criminal defense. So we help folks with divorces all the time. If you have a complex divorce, you have children, if you have assets, if you are a business owner, if you are a military service member and that you're going through a divorce, we can assist you. Get on our calendar and we'll be here to help you out. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time, guys.